for the meeting and our broadcast to folks online. And we'll look for our attendees here. For the chair.
Okay. Is Jamie here?
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. I thought you were remote.
Live and in
Oh,
person.
you are, you are remote. You are
Yeah, I
remote.
made it just in time.
So we don't have to do,
Anymore.
no roll calls. Okay.
Saved everybody having to do roll call.
That's awesome. That was why I came.
Thank you so much. And I apologize for not noticing.
No worries. I snuck in. I wasn't going to be here, but I am.
Okay. Welcome to the planning board meeting for December 20th. I will begin by calling the roll. Alderman Clark. Here. Beth Delisle is not here. Bob Cope.
Here.
Jamie Pennington.
Here.
Heather Rogers is not here. Jen Bluestein.
Here.
Brian Balcom.
Here.
And Rick Taylor here. So we have a quorum. So the first item of business is an approval not required plan for 151 Merrimack Street and 7 Olive Street. We have someone here to speak on that. Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi,
Good, thanks.
Everett Chandler with Winter GEC. I'm here representing the plan tonight. It's an A&R of sorts. What we have here is in historic in Newburyport, we occasionally run into instances where we have overlapping property descriptions. And this is one of those instances that's been there for many generations. I believe the house is from the late 1600s. And over the course of time, owners have come and gone and not really cared about the overlap. But the owner of 5 Olive Street and 151 Merrimack Street during the course of time came to an understanding through some sort of court agreement that a boundary line agreement was going to be done to verify that 5 Olive owned the overlapping portion of the deeds. Fast forward to today, and the owner of 151 Merrimack Street is selling her property. But there is still the overlapping piece of 7 Olive Street, which is the left-hand parcel there, right, exactly. So all this is doing is this is just putting a plan on record so that the attorneys can reference the release of any rights in the overlapping area. You see it's 189 square feet on this plan. It doesn't change anything. As I said, it's an overlap, so they just agreed that, yes, in fact, 7 Olive Street owns this overlap.
And I would add for the record, there's not any new non-conformances that are being created by this, so it's just a straightforward, typical, within the plan notations, it's not creating new buildable lots with these pieces, they're being given to an otherwise already buildable lot, starting construction on. So, pretty run of the mill for, these odd situations you run into, or with the rear yard swapping that sometimes happens to resolve issues that are, things are physically constructed, sometimes you pass along. So.
Any other questions for? I have 2 questions that are curiosity questions. So on the far left-hand corner of the plan, there's another dotted line. Does that mean that sometime in the future, we're gonna have the same situation over there?
Potentially, but that is a different owner
Oh, I know, yes.
off of, yeah. Most likely, the owners it'll never come up.
Yeah.
So probably you'll never see
But
it. No.
it could be another overlapping piece of.
Yes, it is another overlap in the deed descriptions, so, yeah.
And then the other question I have is, when you're looking at the building on 151 Merrimack, the hatching doesn't go all the way around the building. Is there a reason for that, or you just ran out of ink, or?
The hatch,
Am I missing? Oh, this one.
Right there. Yeah.
Oh,
that's the abutting building. That's not 151 Merrimack. 151 Merrimack Street is the corner lot.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, I see.
So
It's a very confusing plan.
there's a lot going on. There was even more going on as we tried to pull it all together to make it legible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we
typically
showed,
there are only 2 properties shown when there's a portion being swapped between one property and another. In a situation like this, it's usually pretty straightforward and you can see more clearly.
Yeah.
This one has a weird piece that goes to the back and that's where it happens. And then you have these zigzags between the discrepancies. So it makes it that much more confusing.
yeah, which is why I came to help explain.
I wouldn't have asked the questions if you weren't here, so. Okay, is there a motion from the board?
I'll move to endorse the A&R plan for 151 Merrimack.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All set,
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next item is a long-awaited public hearing on City of Newburyport, 388 High Street, also known as 447 Merrimack Street / North Atkinson Common, for an application completeness vote, request for waivers and site plan review.
Thank you. My name is Kim Turner. I am a manager of special projects in the mayor's office for the city. So I think before we get into the presentation, we should go over the waiver requests first, which I can just briefly discuss. There are 5, and then Andy, you're gonna have to help me out here. The planting islands will be something to be discussing it
During the plan
later.
review.
Yeah, later.
Correct.
in review. Okay, so the 5 waiver requests are: number 1, a stormwater report will request a waiver from providing a full stormwater report. The reason being that it's the city engineer who's actually working on the stormwater plan for this and would also be the one doing the consulting. We wouldn't be hiring an outside consultant, he'd be consulting the same project. And we'll get into the details about the stormwater management plan that he's provided. We have Diane Gagnon from the city here who worked on the design as well. But in a nutshell, we're providing 15 times more stormwater holding capacity than previously exists on the site. He feels confident that we are going to be reaching any stormwater overages will be dealt with on site. The second waiver is for a traffic study. We've been speaking with our DPS director about this, and his contention is that we're not actually increasing the volume to the site by doing this work. We're actually it's strictly a project to improve traffic safety by eliminating cars from backing out onto Merrimack Street. There's no aspect of the plan that you're seeing tonight that's going to increase the volume of traffic to the park. The third waiver is for the surface and groundwater report. We do include some narrative or some information in the narrative around that. But we are asking for a waiver from doing an actual soil I'm sorry. I guess
Surface and groundwater.
we did a test pit.
Yeah.
in this.
Right, there's data provided of what we would expect to find at the site, in a situation like this, but there's not a whole, detailed report,
Yeah,
going
right.
with it. There's sufficient information for the stormwater design is basically what is being presented, so.
And similarly with the environmental and community impact analysis, we provide a lot of information in the narrative about how we feel that this will positively impact both the environment and the community through this work. So we're asking for a request, a waiver for the formal review. And the last one, where the last waiver request is an existing conditions plan for the entire site. Lower Atkinson is actually part of the entire Atkinson Common, which extends all the way up to High Street. So the portion that we're reviewing is the lower end, where the Pioneer Fields are. It's roughly half of the site, and we're only impacting a very small portion of Lower Atkinson. So to do an existing conditions plan of the entire property just seems like it would be something that, you wouldn't actually look at as part of the work that we're doing here. And that's it in a nutshell, unless you have questions.
So the staff recommends.
Sure, yeah, in the context of this application and based on the scope of work involved, we definitely have no issues with the waivers that are being requested here. I would note, and I'm sure the board will go into it as part of the discussion, we had certainly some discussion before your hearing tonight, reviewing the plan, which was modified a couple ways to improve it since it was originally submitted. On the traffic end of things, there's some more detail that, I think speaks to the benefits of the project. So, from the office's perspective, we have no objection to the waivers. We recommend approval of the waivers, completion, confirmation of the application is complete, and then moving into the public hearing from there.
So, no questions, then I look for a motion to grant the requested waivers of the submittal requirements for Lower Atkinson Common site plan review application found in section 15E as requested by the applicant.
So moved.
Alderman Lewis, second. Okay, all in favor of granting the waivers? Thank you. So then I need a motion to determine the application complete, including the waiver of the submittal requirements.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Great, okay, so now we move into the actual presentation of the
Great,
the
so
plan.
thank you all. We've had a very long pause in this project. I know we were slated to come before you last summer. We wound up having a site walk, a community site walk. It was intended for the Conservation Commission, but we also opened it up to the larger community. We received an awful lot of feedback from the community.
Sorry, Kim, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna, if folks could speak up loud, we're still waiting for better equipment in the meeting room, and I just want to make sure that folks at home can hear, and I found that, if we speak louder, it's a little easier for those folks to hear, so I apologize for
So
interrupting,
it's
but
not,
we're not actually using that mic,
Okay.
yeah. So, if the folks could speak loud, we're going through these owls here, and speaking loud, we have to pick up well, so sorry for interrupting.
I thought I was speaking.
Yeah.
Trying not to yell into the microphone.
thank you.
Okay, so, so we had a long pause. The site walk that we had with the Conservation Commission and the community was back in late August. We received a lot of feedback from the community. We had been working with the Pioneer League and the Community Action School, and other stakeholders. And so we wanted the time to sort of take a pause and rework the plan to bring in the feedback from the community and make sure that we were designing a project that sort of suited the needs of the majority of the people in the community. Next slide, please. So I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. We'll start with a brief introduction. I will review the project and the changes that the community will see from the, it's actually a July plan, but it was reviewed in August for the Conservation Commission. And then we'll go into questions. Tonight I have with me Diane Gagnon, who is works in the city assistant or associate assistant city engineer, who's been working primarily on the stormwater management plan for this. So she will be providing information on stormwater and traffic for the project. Next slide, please. So just to give you a brief overview of the history of this project. So Lower Atkinson, also known as Pioneer Fields, is a very heavily used park. It's located on Merrimack Street between Plummer and Moulton. It is the home of the Pioneer League baseball teams. So there's 3 baseball diamonds there that are used by the Pioneer Leagues, but it is also used quite heavily by the community as a whole as well. The Community Action School, which is located on the corner of Merrimack and Plummer, utilizes the playground here on a daily basis. They actually need use of that playground for their licensing. And the park, this section of the park, again, not including Upper Atkinson, which is the Victorian sort of formal park, this lower portion has 3 baseball diamonds, a basketball court, a playground, and a clubhouse that doubles as a snack shack and storage for the Pioneer League. Currently, there is very limited parking at this park compared to the use that the park sees on a daily basis. There are 33 angled parking spaces, which you can see in this photograph. These spaces, cars need to back out onto Merrimack Street in order to continue down the roadway, which causes, as you can imagine, conflicts with vehicles, and especially during heavy times when there are tournaments and other games being played with children being dropped off at the park. In addition to the on-street sort of angled parking, there are 22 spaces located in a gravel lot that is immediately behind the Community Action School on the corner of Plummer and Merrimack. Next slide, please. This is just an existing conditions. Apologies that it's kind of blurry, but this just gives an overview of the 3 baseball diamonds. And then there's that small gravel lot behind the Community Action School, right there where Andy is pointing, and then the angled parking along Merrimack Street. Actually,
Oh, it's actually a little over here, yeah.
yeah, there's actually, yeah, thank you. So there's other angled spaces on the other side of the clubhouse as well, which are not striped on this plan. Next slide, please. So to give you a brief history of how this project came to be, in 2020, the Parks Commission worked on a master plan for the park, and they had 5 primary goals for the master plan. The first was to relocate a aging playground that's currently located on Merrimack Street. towards the center portion of the park. And the reason for relocating it is it would free up the space along Merrimack to bring the parking into the park. That playground will be a universally accessible playground, so it will benefit and support the needs of children of all abilities. The second main reason for the master plan was to alleviate drainage problems. As you can imagine, this is a fairly, with the exception of the slope between Lower Atkinson and Upper Atkinson, the fields themselves are very flat, and there are puddling and other drainage issues at the park, which we wish to remedy, which Diane will go into detail on in a little bit. Thirdly, as we mentioned before, alleviating some of the parking issues at the park. So again, bringing that on-street angled parking completely internal to the park so that there's no longer that conflict between children getting dropped off and cars queuing and parking and, kids using the park. The Parks Commission also wanted to make the park more accessible, again, through the parking, and the playground, as we discussed, but also adding sidewalks at Merrimack Street, increasing the number of bike racks at the park, and improving the shade. Right now, in the summertime, this park can get very hot, so we want to bring in some more shade trees and canopy to the park to make it a little bit less hot in the summertime. And finally, a longer range goal for the master plan, which is not on the table at this time, is to renovate the existing basketball court and make it a multi-purpose sport court. That is something that will be phased in later on, but right now, tonight, we're focusing primarily on the parking movements. Next slide, please. I'm actually going to have you go to the slide after this, Andy. So I wanted to bring up that this is the revised plan, and I realize it's the first time that you are seeing it in a public setting, but this has changed from the July plan that was reviewed at the site walk in August. So an overview of the project is we are again eliminating those angled parking spaces on Merrimack Street, bringing an asphalt lot and completely internal to the park with a one-way vehicular circulation. We will provide parking for 24 spaces, including 4 ADA accessible spaces, queuing for 7 cars on the park side of this asphalt lot. And again, a one-way circulation. That is on the east side of the clubhouse. On the west side of the clubhouse, we are removing all angled on-street parking, providing a drop-off for a single bus, which is the only bus that is needed. We spoke with the athletic director for the school, and they only ever have 1 bus coming to the park at any given time. No trees will be removed for this bus drop-off. The trees that are there, the arborvitae will be maintained. And then expanding that gravel parking lot behind Founders Field. So there's a small dotted line that shows the extent of the gravel parking lot currently. We're more or less doubling the size of it to provide spaces for 48 vehicles in that lot. So that gravel lot goes from 22 to 48 spaces. We're also addressing some of the drainage issues here. We have small swales behind Founders Field in a double dotted line with a perforated pipe that will extend all the way to between Hawks Field and Pepe Field, and then around the side of Pepe Field. So again, and Dan will speak to this in a little bit more detail. This should remedy some of the drainage issues on the field. We're also providing 15 times more stormwater holding capacity in a designed stormwater wetland behind the gravel lot. I have a blow up of that later on in the presentation. But in essence, we are relocating an existing isolated wetland, pushing it back a little bit behind the gravel lot, expanding its size and planting it entirely with native vegetation, removing some invasive species, and improving the overall holding capacity as well as the way that the stormwater management functions at the park. In total, we are increasing the parking here from 55 spaces to 72, plus queuing for 7 cars and the bus drop-off. The sidewalks are part of this project, so the sidewalks will now run across the entire frontage on Merrimack Street to provide safe access for pedestrians if they're moving from Moulton to Plummer and vice versa. I'm gonna have you stay on this slide while I talk about, details related to the landscape buffer. So, one item that came up with the public comment was a concern about the number of trees that were being removed for this gravel lot. Originally, we had, proposed 22 trees to be removed, and the asphalt lot, extended further than what I'm showing here. We've cut that back. So instead of removing 22 trees, we're removing 16, so we can save that cluster that you see of the open circles at the very end of the gravel lot. We're gonna save that cluster of trees. Besides those 16, there are 2 other additional trees that we're removing at the front of the park near the clubhouse. One is a Norway maple that is in severe decline. Sorry, and if you go to the left of that, no, other
This one
side.
here.
Up from there. Yep, go over to, yep, right in that location, severely declining Norway maple right there that we would like to remove, as well as an ash tree that is on the corner of the clubhouse where you had your cursor before. This is an ash that's compromised due to emerald ash ore. The flare of the tree is actually lifting the asphalt there, and it's creating some drainage problems. You can actually see the line of water as we have heavy storms that enters into the clubhouse. We are also removing and replacing the row of arborvitae to the east of the clubhouse where the asphalt parking lot is going to be installed. So that you can see the arborvitae just get pushed back closer to Founder's Field, so there's still a buffer between the park and the road. We've also added 5 arborvitae towards the closest neighbor. One up from the Community Action School, there's a buffer of 5 arborvitae there, since that neighbor will be the most impacted by this change. And again, from a landscape perspective, we're adding in a large number of native wetland plants and native understory shrubs behind the gravel parking lot within that stormwater wetland, which I'll get into greater detail in a moment. I'm gonna turn it over to Diane and talk about the traffic at this point. Diane Gavin, assistant engineer for the city. Andy, would you mind going back to the existing condition plan?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Kim has touched on a lot of the design that we came up with to address the safety concerns in the area. One of the major issue here was concerns for residents, both pedestrians, bikers, and drivers in this area. So as part of this project, we have designated this zone as a safety zone. So this entire length from Plummer Street to Moulton Street will be designated a 20-mile-per-hour zone. And that is something that we have received an ordinance for. There will be signs placed sporadically along this road indicating that this will be a safety zone, 20 miles per hour, and we are also including a no parking along this entire stretch. So as you can see on this existing conditions plan, over by Plummer, we have a crosswalk just beyond Plummer. So that'll be kind of where it ends. And then it extends all the way over to Moulton Street, and just past Moulton Street, we will also have another, you keep going in.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's right across the frontage.
Yeah, so it's on the other side. So all the way over to after Moulton Street, that will also be the extent of the safety zone. There we go. I know it's not on this plan, but we are proposing a sidewalk for this entire length as well. Currently, there's one on the northern side of Merrimack, but we will be installing a sidewalk from Moulton Street all the way to Plummer Street. Currently, there is no sidewalk on the park side. So we will be doing that as part of this project. And as in addition to this project, while we're out in the field, talking with the residents and working on Plummer Ave, which was repaved, and sidewalks, reconstructed, I guess, last spring. We spoke a lot with the Community Action School, and there was found to be a need for safety measures to be taken here in that area, as well as the entire roadway. So in addition to creating a safety zone on Merrimack Street, we extended that safety zone up Plummer Ave up to Christopher Street. And we are implementing a no parking along Plummer for the first 120 feet up the road and a designated drop off for that school adjacent to the community action school. So that will be a drop off only between certain hours where there's actually pick up and drop off. The children are little and the parents need to get out of the car, and we just needed a designated spot for them to pull over so they weren't up and down the street there. I think we can probably go back to the original. So Kim has already talked about a lot of the design on what the measures we've taken to make this safer for park goers, our ball players, anyone that's interested in using the park. We have pulled all of the parking off of the street. One of the major issues here were cars backing out onto Merrimack Street. And as everyone who's driven by there knows, that it's a very busy road, and especially during the hours when the ball players are there, you know, after school, in the evenings, when commuters are going back and forth. So we have pulled all the parking from Merrimack and closed that off by eliminating the parking on the west side. And now, as Kim mentioned, that will just be a drop-off zone and a place for a bus to park if necessary. The rest of the traffic will enter the one-way next to the concession stand. They can either pull off and do a drop off there or park in that parking area. There are 22 spots there, and if those are full up, the drivers can proceed to the gravel lot. And as Kim mentioned, we are increasing that by 20 spots overall. So does that have 48 spots back there? They can either, and it's very visible. So if you don't have any parking out front, it's clearly that there's a huge lot back there. And one thing we just want to remember too is all these ball players are consistently going there. If you're on a team, you're there for 2 or 3 practices a week, plus games year after year. So we're not really concerned with people not knowing that that gravel lot exists. If there is a backup on Merrimack to get into the paved lot, I would say majority of the people know to go past that and go into the gravel lot behind. I think Kim is just going to talk about the numbers of cars. Sure. Yep. Yeah, so if you want to actually, Andy, go 2 slides forward. Next one. The next one, sorry. Yeah. So we did a little study of the cars that are parked there during the season when baseball is in session. And again, the existing number of parking spaces of park currently is 55, and we want to increase that. So there are currently 562 children registered for the Pioneer League. And we did a study of parking every 30 minutes. And that's what that chart is showing you. So again, 3:30 to 4, there's 40 vehicles parked in one bus. 4 to 4:30, 58 cars in one bus. And then that bottom line shows with the new plan, can we accommodate the number of cars? And the answer is yes, with the exception of 1 hour between 4:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. And so at between 4:30 and 5 p.m., I think the overage of number of cars is like 4. So those people would likely find a spot on Plummer or go up to the parking lot off of Christopher Street, which is also an Atkinson Common. They could park in that small lot there. Between 5 and 5:30, there's an overage of cars on approximately 22. And so even if we did a full expansive gravel lot, there's probably no way we would be able to accommodate an additional 22 cars in the park. So there's just going to be a 30-minute period of time when, you know, there's going to be some cars that will have to park on the street. But overall, we are going to be able to accommodate parking with this plan for every other 30-minute increment during any given evening during the baseball season, which is when the park has the heaviest number of vehicles at the park. Next slide, please. We'll have you talk about stormwater. So overall, the project will improve stormwater runoff leaving the site and both the quality and the quantity of that amount of runoff. Today, we have water runoff coming off over the hill that's behind all the ball fields. That water travels over the fields and heads north to Merrimack Street, where it ultimately crosses the road by ways of our stormwater system and outlets behind homes on Merrimack Street. And there's clearly defined streams back there and further flows straight to the Merrimack River. The east side, which is the side where the stormwater wetland is currently, the water runs off the hill there and is captured by a small depression, small stormwater depression that's approximately 200 square feet. And it pools there and it's outletted by a pipe that runs into our stormwater system right at the entrance of the gravel lot that's out there today. Over in the center of the fields, it kind of just flows off over the hill and towards Merrimack Street, where it's picked up by a couple of catch basins. And on the western side, to the left of the ball fields, and I'm looking at like Merrimack Street to the west side, there is a swale there that comes from the high point there and loops around the ball field right on Merrimack Street. Sorry, I don't name the ball fields. And that is currently a defined swale with some stone, and that runs into a catch basin and then ultimately into the street as well. And if you could go to these, yeah, there we go. So our design, we really wanted to have the flow replicate what it does today. I don't know if you can see on this plan, kind of in the center of the gravel lot, there is an outline of the old, well, the existing. You go down, Andy, there's like a outline of the existing stormwater or the wetland. It's like right in the center of the gravel lot.
Oh, sorry, that's, yeah.
So that today is the wetland that's out there now. It's about 200 square feet, a total surface area. And we increased that size to about 3,000 feet total of the new proposed stormwater wetlands. So the water will continue to flow from the hill and either be captured in that wetland or be captured in the gravel lot. We have the gravel lot to be graded towards the catch basin. And that catch basin will send the water into the sediment forebay. That will take out the sediment, and when that overflows, it'll flow into the constructed stormwater wetland. And from there, that will flow from a pipe back to the original outlet for the existing wetland. And that will then empty out into our existing stormwater system out in the street. So that whole idea, that's not really changing. We're just sort of shifting that wetland from the center there to behind the gravel lot. And we also have a swale adjacent to the fence of the ball field on that area. There's currently an obvious wetland. It wasn't constructed that way or designed, but you can visually see that there is a swale out there today where water runs. So we just wanted to make sure to catch that and send that into the system as well, just to dry that out. So we are proposing for a swale to be built, and underneath that swale, an under drain, just to capture any groundwater that we can there to help alleviate some of the wetness that gathers on the field. And then we'll also be catching from the center of the field. There is a swale that continues from the swale shown on that plan all the way through the center of the field over to the basketball courts. And that will be a 6-foot wide swale that will hold the water and direct it towards the outlet. And we also are proposing an under drain for that. And on the western end, from a high point there, we're going to replicate what's happening today. We're going to just rebuild the swell that's out there and include an under drain to capture any extra water that we possibly can, and replace the structure that's out there and just have it continue to do what it's doing today. As far as the proposed parking lot, I'm not going to go to the
You want the whole layout?
inside, yeah. Yeah, okay, so as far as the proposed parking lot, we will have a couple of catch basins, one at the entrance and one towards the exit of the paved parking lot, and water will be directed to either one of those catch basins and outlet as it's doing today into the street drainage system. I just want to, so the total impervious area, well, the total area that we looked at here is about 30,000 square feet. And that area included anything that was altered. We had existing pavement, grassed areas, gravel areas, mulched areas, anything that was altered. And to do a comparison of what the actual increase of impervious area was, we found it to be approximately 4,000 square feet. So there's a net increase in impervious about 4,000 square feet. And that's equivalent to like what happens in a single family home. And that's something that the state and the city of Newburyport, we dismiss and we don't need to do a study for that. It's a very insignificant amount. But we feel as though that this increase in impervious is compensated for in the large stormwater system we have out back. So that'll be catching more than flow that we have now, where we said 15 times the amount that's currently there. So we're going from about 200 square feet to up to about 3,000 square feet of storage there that will both store the water and treat the water before it enters our system. You want to go to comments? We're almost done here. Scroll forward to the blow up of the stormwater wetland, one more slide thing. Yep, right there. So we actually had our public hearing with the Conservation Commission last night to review the details of the stormwater wetland and the plantings and all of that. They have kept their public hearing open, but they wanted me to reiterate to you tonight that they didn't have any further sort of comments or questions. They just wanted to make sure that you all didn't have any additional changes before they closed out that public hearing. But in terms of the environmental impact, which is something that we talked about last night, again, per what Diane just said, we feel that we're improving the ecosystem here with this in stormwater wetland. We're removing invasive species and we're planting native vegetation that will provide both on-site water quality treatment, but also support wildlife through, selecting plants that are fruiting, that have habitat qualities to them. So things like winterberry and summer sweet and blue flag iris and again, native plants that are conducive to this type of wetland area. We're also vastly increasing the number of canopy trees overall in the park. So within the 100-foot buffer zone, which is jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, we are removing 16 trees and planting 16 trees. The park as a whole, we're removing 18, so 2 additional to what's inside the wetland buffer. So 18 to those 2 additional by the clubhouse. So 18 trees being removed and 36 trees being proposed. So it's a 2-to-1 park wide, a 1-to-1 within the buffer zone of the wetland. And so I just wanted to briefly go, if you want to go one more slide. The changes from the July 6th plan, just the plan that was reviewed during the site walk. This is what I wanted to do tonight. So again, we have reduced the number of proposed gravel spaces from 56 to 48. And we've reduced the number of asphalt spaces from 32 to 24. The number of trees to be removed was reduced from 24 to 18. If you want to go back to the full plan, Andy. The reason why we reduced the number of parking spaces along Merrimack Street was a couple of reasons. We wanted to improve the vehicular movements here, but we also wanted to provide some on-street canopy. So as you can see, there's 4 canopy trees along Merrimack Street there. We removed 2 parking spaces in order to accommodate those planting islands. And that was something we had heard from someone who had commented during the site walk. We swapped the angled parking spaces along Merrimack Street from the park side to the street side. And the reason for this was so that parents dropping off their children could drop off their children on the park side of the asphalt lot, so they weren't crossing over the asphalt lot to get into the park. And this allowed us to have an ample queuing area for 7 cars. We moved the 4 handicap accessible parking spaces a little bit further into the park so that the drive aisle would not be impeded by anyone parking in those handicap accessible parking spaces. We added that bus drop off to the west of the clubhouse, which we talked about. Again, no trees are being removed for that. We extended the drainage swales, not just behind Founder's Field, but through across the main aisle of the center part of the park and between Hawks and Pepe Fields, and then wrapping around the side of Pepe Field. So that's improving the drainage overall of the park. And again, we vastly increased the number of proposed trees, so 18 to be removed and 36 to be replanted. And that's what I have for you tonight. If there's any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ken? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a couple of, could you comment on the size of the trees that are being planted?
Yes, they are on the planting schedule. There are 12 smaller trees that are going within the wetland buffer that are going to be field located. That's a pretty heavily wooded site, and so we want to do the work and then find out where the spaces are to plant the trees. Those will be a little smaller. They'll be 1.5 to 2 inch caliper so that they can accommodate, you know, the size of the area we have to plant. The larger trees in the center part of the park will be more like 2.5 inch caliper. So they'll be decent sized trees.
And the ones along Merrimack Street?
2.5. Yes, 2.5.
And, just, could you, I guess I was trying to figure out, it was hard to see exactly on the plan, but are there, the trees by the asphalt, I mean, not the gravel lot? Those are largely existing, the ones in the,
three,
by
yep.
closer,
The 3 in that island, so all the trees that have an open circle in the middle are existing and the closed circle are proposed.
Ah.
So the 3 large oaks, which are midway down Founder's Field, those are
Those are
existing to be
existing
protected. We're actually moving the gravel a little bit further away from the crown of those trees to try to protect them a little bit better.
okay, that's what I thought, and so, and the other new trees are in the area between the.
Sure, so
between the
there's
both fields?
2 below, if you want to scroll up a little bit, Andy, so there's 2 additional oaks right sort of at the entrance to the gravel lot, then the 4 along Merrimack Street. 1 to replace the declining Norway maple by the bleachers at Founder's Field that's coming out. And then there's quite a few, there's 4, I want to say, existing trees on that central spine, and I think we're adding in 6 or 7 along there.
Yeah, just wanted to get a feel for where the, the.
Yeah, and then in the wetland, by the stormwater wetland, if you want to scroll down, there's 5 sort of mid-size, I think those are river birch at the end of the cluster that we're saving at the end of the gravel lot, and then there's red maples sort of opposite that the future basketball court.
And another question, it's just, there's an existing chain link fence around the field to the west of the new playground location?
Yes.
And so
with a
that's going to stay.
15-foot ball net, yes. that's
Okay,
being
so there's no
installed.
additional fencing on the.
There's fencing around the playground that will be installed, low 4-foot
Okay,
fence. And then the fencing along the outfield of Pepe will remain, but there's gonna be 15-foot ball netting can be taken down in the winter time, but it will be up when there's players there.
okay. And as far as the expanded gravel lot, is there any markings for the parking spaces, or are we just
We
assuming that
probably
they're
will
gonna?
treat it much the same we do Cherry Hill, where they do stripe it every year or so. Yes, so we
Because I was wondering if we
can
were
look
gonna-
into that.
Yeah, if they were really gonna be able to count on those parking spaces.
Yeah,
depending on-
yeah, so at Cherry Hill, they do sort of spray them out, I think, beginning of every season.
Thank you.
Jamie?
Just a couple of questions about just the user experience. Are you anticipating a budget for signage for wayfinding? Because I think the big improvement in this plan is the drop off area.
Mm.
And are you thinking about some signs to help kind of reinforce what your plan is? And last kind of related, you said no parking along Merrimack Street. Have you thought
Yeah,
about
so
no
on-
stopping as well, perhaps to further enforce people using the drop off area?
Yeah, so on the proposed plan, which we have submitted, it's just not on this presentation, we do have, quite a few, signs out on Merrimack Street stating both the safety zone and, stating that there will be no parking along this stretch of road. Into the actual parking lot, we will have a no parking where that drop-off zone is, and it will state that this is a drop-off zone only. And both the east and the west side. So we will have all that signage, and we do plan for that.
If I could, through the chair, I would say also, just because I am a member of the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, or TSAC, this area has been a frequent area of discussion for a number of years. And, you know, presumably this will help to improve a lot of things over there, including the backing out, the sort of chaotic backing out that happens in the street. I suspect that one way or another, even after these improvements, you know, there'll be some monitoring sort of how things are going there, seeing obviously the improvements of your point, I'm sure, making sure that people are actually, you know, following through when they're doing the drop-offs, you know, now in these new established areas. But I suspect, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, that because the people are going on there on a frequent basis, it'll sort itself out very quickly. But people wanted to get to the parking spaces they need very quickly, you know, off the street and not doing this sort of drop off in the street. So I imagine that if there was a problem like that, we would be communicating with the police department, asking them to swing by to make sure that we're reinforcing the message that this is not, you know, even a drop off spot, do it a lot, or, you know, so.
So related, is the shoulder still 5 feet as it was in the
Yep.
July plans?
Yep.
Which is too narrow really for someone to want to pull over.
Exactly, so we kept the roadway as is, and that's basically where I started my design from. Merrimack Street was recently striped. So we have a 5-foot shoulder, our, travel lane, 2 travel lanes, and then the 5-foot shoulder as well. And from that 5-foot shoulder line is where I drew my, curbing. So everything from this, on this design was basically regulated by that, because we did not want to narrow Merrimack Street at all. But it is, like you said, it's too narrow to park, like there's clearly a marking for a travel lane. But you would be clearly like halfway into the travel lane if you park there. So one, there's no room to park, and 2, we will, have signage out there to indicate that as well.
I just want to make sure people use it the way you designed it, because I think it's a
Yeah.
huge improvement. I'm just worried that people kind of.
Yeah, it's not,
use it the way you
it's
intended.
not comfortable to park out there. I mean, you're opening your door into full traffic, people will have to
Yeah.
drive around you. That's clearly a shoulder, it's just, I'm not really concerned, and we will, if we need to, again, if we need to put out more signs out there, just to indicate it's maybe right out front, where people, if people start in the parking right out in front of the park, then we will put more signs out there.
Just kind of following up on Jamie's question though, one of the 5:30 to 6 or whatever it is, when you're 22 spaces short, and I think you said that cars will end up parking on the street. You mean Moulton and Plummer?
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
So will not be parking in front of it.
correct.
And they'll not be parking on either side of Merrimack.
Nope, there's no parking on that side.
Other questions? Yes, Brian.
Yeah, continuing the conversation about traffic flow, as you enter, to the left of the plan, you kind of one-way traffic coming out and then potentially leaving.
Correct.
And then you have some incoming. What, treatment will you have? Will you have a stop sign on the one-way traffic? Because there's always that pinch point where people are coming in, particularly when they're in a hurry. They're entering the site, say to go to the back gravel.
Yeah.
Then you may have someone else exiting, and there's always that odd, which affects the queue coming out of the driveway, so.
Currently, we do not have a stop sign there. We could definitely put like a stop bar there. I do feel like the natural flow of the traffic is the, 2-way into the gravel lot. So a natural place to stop would be before the crosswalk, to look both ways before you cross over. If we find that we do need that, then we can do that.
Yeah, I think it's worth treating it, you know, it is, because we know, I used to live by 2 ball fields. And the rate of traffic is slow until practice starts or the game starts. And some people have the natural tendency to come in off the road, even if they're going 20, they're gonna come in 20. And if they run into that traffic
Yeah.
coming out of the single, then they'll stop. I mean, it's not a high speed thing, but then it pushes the queue back.
Yeah.
Just a consideration.
Other questions? I have a couple. So can we go, do we have the engineered plan here? I guess it's okay. So there's the center crosswalk. And we no longer have cars parking on the opposite side of Merrimack. And there are crosswalks at Bolton and Plummer. So I was just questioning whether we need that center crosswalk and the drop down and the sidewalk and everything there.
So we have gone back and forth, because there is currently another crosswalk out there. Our concern, we do want most people to go to the park side before they hit Plummer or Moulton. And really the only people that would necessarily need that center crosswalk would be anybody living in across the street from the park, or anybody who has not crossed yet. My concern right now is that we do have a handicap ramp on the northern side of Merrimack Street, and once we get rid of that, we really need a directed and safe travel lane for those to get across the street.
Yeah, okay.
It could be eliminated, but at this time, yeah.
It's a small
Yeah.
dollar amount.
But another thing, it also slows people down. Like, I feel like when people are driving, they see a crosswalk, they slow down, they see some signs, and then everybody speeds right back up. So that will just be another indication to slow down. It's safety zone. There's people around both directions. I don't think it could hurt. I don't know if we don't need it, but it's not something that we need to take away of.
The sidewalks are all concrete?
Yep.
And is that true for the one between that goes around behind the drop off?
Oh, I apologize. So that one will be asphalt.
Okay.
I think the money thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No, I
likely,
was just
yeah,
wondering.
likely asphalt, yeah.
And I was wondering also about in the drop off area on the plan, it's not on this plan, but there's a section by the handicap spaces that says flush, I think it says flush,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And on the right-hand side is where you go in, there's a flush, and there are clearly ramps in the sidewalk, so does it go up where the drop off
So
zone
what's
is?
gonna happen is if you're coming around the corner from the concession stand, like right there, you're gonna come around the corner, that will be a handicap ramp down. And then we do have that area, if you just go up and around that curve, that area will be flush because we need that. If you see the roadway up through the park, we need access for any emergency vehicles to get in there. So we do have proposed, just a gate, I don't know, if it's just gonna be a chain on some bollards, so that if we do need access back there, we can, and that curb will be flushed. And that flush curb will also be included over by the handicap spots. So that whole area, length of the handicap spots, those will be flush. Both there and on the west side where, we do have the drop off, just in case we do need some.
But that central part will have a vertical curve.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rest of the area will have a typical vertical curve and,
Okay, and, next to the angle parking and the sidewalk, between them is 2-foot grass strip.
Mhm.
Right. The question, a comment came up from one of the letters about concern about headlights going into people's houses on the opposite side of the street. Did you consider, I mean, a 2-foot strip really isn't very much. Did you consider possibly putting a 3.5-foot wall or something?
well, we've not considered putting a
Or
wall.
fence, yeah.
Or a fence, we have not considered that at this point. If we do find that it's an issue, that is something we can look at later on. The 2-foot grass strip was just, it's something that we can put out there to give a little buffer between the cars parking and the sidewalk, pedestrians, little kids on bikes. A lot of these cars are big now. We have giant Suburbans and they take up like half the sidewalk if their front end or back end is hanging over. So we just wanted to give as much room as we possibly could. And that 2-foot strip was pretty much determined by the amount of space we had between the existing roadway and that shoulder offset the dugout actually, completely, controlled its design. We're not moving that, we're not moving the ball field, we're not moving any of the fencing. So that was just as much as we could get. If we could get more, we would, but that's.
And the only other question I had was about the, on the wetland plan, there is something identified as a micro pool.
Mhm.
Is that the same as what you were describing as the forebay for the?
So the sediment forebay is where the water comes in first. That is where the catch basin empties into, and that will allow the sediment to, excuse me, settle, and that can be cleaned out periodically, and then the clean water will overflow into the wetland itself. The micro pool is just part of the design. It's almost like a second sediment basin where the water just sits, and as that fills up, then that will enter the pipe and out into this system out there. So that's just part of the design, because there's like low marsh, high marsh, and then we have this micro pool to catch all the water.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I guess we could open up the public hearing then. Is anybody, we don't actually have anybody in this.
Well, we may remotely, you have one, strange, but not, here we go.
Yeah.
So we have, Jen and John Blyler. Would you like to address the board? Jen and John, can you hear us? And you may need to unmute on your end. It looks like you're unmuted from our end where, you should be getting audio if you are speaking. I'll give a moment on that. Christine Wallace? Councilor Wallace?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Can you hear me? I'm not sure I can hear you.
We can. Can you hear us?
Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone, and for the presentation. It's exciting to see this coming to fruition. It's been many years. And with the main goal of getting the parking off of the street and internal to the park where it's protected. And it's just exciting to see that happening. I just have a few comments, so bear with me here. A critical piece of that, so I had worked on this for years, and as a counselor, and even before that as a resident, critical piece of that is making sure that Merrimack Street is safe. And the reason that we did the safety zone, I think was sponsored by myself, Councilor McCauley, and Councilor Tantar 2.5 years ago, was because there was a big discussion of, do we take parking off the street or not? If you take parking off the street, then you might be losing some traffic calming from cars that are parked there, but it was just too dangerous with the kids coming in and out and too many accidents. So it's critical that improvements to the safety zone happen. I know there's talk of signs, but the intent was never just signs. Like we truly want to slow down cars, because it's not just the park that needs to be safe, but getting to the park needs to be safe, and there need to be off-site improvements. So there was mention of sidewalk going up to Moulton. Last I understood from the administration's roadway plan, there was no sidewalk proposed. I would say that is critical to put in at the same time with this project, if not before. Would also like to see pedestrian push button lights, whether it's one or whether 3, either end and in the middle. But the problem is it's not just during games. There's a lot of talk about the Pioneer League and the baseball. Kids completely understand, but it's really tough even when there's not a game. It's hard to cross the street. It's scary out there waiting for buses. So the intent was a safety zone would not only help during games, but also when there are not games. And ideally, the approaches in and out would be, cars would also have to slow down. So it would go, the effects would go beyond the safety zone. So I just want to advocate for that work. It's critical, very critical. I do want to say I do not support the gravel lot expansion. This was added after I was more involved with the project, and the master plan actually showed a lot more parking out in front, the original master plan. So it has changed quite a bit. And it just seems like a lot of impact, a lot of work. There's going to be maintenance, there's a cost, when in fact there might be alternatives. I think more spaces could be fit in the front. Maybe alternatives to getting people not to drive, encourage people to bike or carpool or whatever. So it just doesn't really sit well with me, and especially altering natural drainage patterns, because it's never how it actually is. And one question I have, not to answer, or not to, you don't have to answer now, is there was talk about we're increasing the volume of the basin from like 200 square feet to something. But if you look at the existing wetland that's being filled versus the proposed, they look like they're about the same size, but this is a question for later. So I do not support the waivers for not providing any additional stormwater information. I don't feel like this is an isolated wetland because it drains to the Merrimack River. It goes to the wetlands across the street and it drains to the Merrimack River. So in that sense, it would be subject to the Wetlands Protection Act and the stormwater policy, but it's also a good idea just to do what you can for the stormwater policy. And also a question on operation and maintenance and how is it going to be maintained, how often, et cetera. With regards to the traffic studies, I'm in agreement that if we're looking at existing conditions versus moving parking around for baseball games, not much is going to change. But what will change is if you put in the pickleball courts, there will be traffic in and out of there throughout the day. You know, you've got 3 courts, and they play for an hour or two. So in almost every other permitting that you do with the state, whether it's Wetlands Protection Act or with stormwater regs or with like an EIR or even sometimes in zoning, you look at the full build out, you don't phase it because that way things can get lost. So I would highly recommend that as this project gets built, or before it gets built, we look at the full build out scenario and just be honest with everybody that, okay, we're going to put in these pickleball courts. This is how much traffic we're going to see in and out, even though that's meant for the future, but it is part of the plan. So in summary, it's the street part. I want to make sure it's safe. The cars go slow enough. There's safe sidewalks and crossings. It's so critical. And if that requires taking money from the gravel lot expansion and putting that into the street work, I would be all for that. But that's going to be up to the council to decide once they discuss the funding. That is it for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have another.
Jen and John Blyler, are you able to address us?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can. Very
Thank
much.
you so much. I finally figured that out. I appreciate that. I just had a couple just brief questions. One, I just thank you to the city for just responding to so many of the neighbors' concerns on the trees, etc., on the site. I did have a question on the impervious area of angle parking and where that drainage goes. Are there catch basins in there? That's one question. And the second question, are we losing a crosswalk on Merrimack Street? And can you elaborate on that? Thank you.
Go ahead.
As far as losing a crosswalk on Merrimack, there is one, yeah, and it's gonna.
Sorry, I was gonna blow this up, but that's how.
Yep, that's perfect. Kind of right across from where the entrance to the gravel drive is. They're shown in like a gray,
Sorry.
yeah, right there.
Yeah.
That one will be eliminated. We do plan to take that one out as we are putting one on the opposite side of Plummer. And then your other question, there will be a couple of catch basins in the paved parking lot to catch that runoff there. And I do want to clarify from Christine's comment, sorry, I'm jumping back, that 200 square foot that we're talking about,
is the pool of water, and that outline that Andy kind of moved its mouse around, yeah, and the existing,
Oh, yeah, that's
so
existing.
that is actually the limits of the wetland itself, the size of the actual where the water pools to. So that, obviously, that's not that much bigger than proposed. And was there another question? I don't know.
There's nobody else who has a hand up right now. So we'll close the public hearing. And, move
Did someone
to,
put their hand up?
Ben Harmon has.
Ben, go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. Ben Harmon, 298 High Street. I just wanted to say I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Wallace. Thank her for her years of work on safety along Merrimack and in service to the city council. I agree. I think this is a good step toward addressing a lot of those concerns. And I also agree we should encourage and enable more pedestrian and bike use, but I would just remind folks that a lot of the use of the park as it relates to Pioneer League and the softball team are people from out of town. So we're limited in our ability to influence that. I also do want to thank the special project manager, the Conservation Commission, and the Planning Board for helping to bring in a healthy amount of public comment in this process. We've taken our time, and it appears that we're incorporating that into the designs here in this latest iteration. I will not attempt to comment on expert opinions of the director of DPS, the city engineer, and others who've weighed in on drainage and traffic concerns, but we do have their voices incorporated in memos. I think creating this amount of parking off the street and reducing that traffic is a good step in the right direction for residents, families, and kids using the park. It's not the end of the work that we need to do, but I do think this is a good compromise. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, public hearing is closed. We'll now move on to motion. We have, well, first of all, we have two, the staff memo only referenced one vote at this point, but we actually have two votes that we need to take. One vote that is to, if we wish, grant the waiver for the tree, the tree requirement in the parking lot. And I've drafted a motion, and I'll read the motion that was drafted, but we also, if somebody wants to have more discussion before we move on to that motion, we can. But this is the motion that I was going to put before the vote on the plan. Motion to approve a waiver from the requirements in section XB-HD4 to provide one tree per 10 parking spaces and to maintain at least 5% of the area of the parking area as landscaping, including trees and landscape islands with no more than 20 parking spaces between each island. So as I think Alden was talking about in the plan, we have that group of 3 oaks, I think they are. This, if we're to do a standard parking lot design, we need one oak in one island and another oak in another island to separate the rows of trees into fewer than 20. So the point of that waiver is to essentially come up with the same amount of trees and landscaping, but without breaking it into fewer than 20 spaces between landscaped islands. So that is the additional motion that's not in the staff report. But I guess I'll open up for any discussion now, unless anybody wants to make a motion first. Go ahead, I'll open it up. Just go ahead.
Makes sense. Sense.
It seems reasonable to me, given the new planting on the far side and the other planting adjacent to the property line and maintaining those existing trees. So I guess I'm okay with that.
Okay. So I'll accept a motion to approve that waiver.
I'll move to approve the waiver.
Okay. Second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Not all in favor of granting that waiver? Any opposed? So now we can move on to the site plan review application itself. And I just want to be clear, so much of this is about taking parking off the street. And it's really been represented, and as Diane has described, the design, the street design doesn't really allow for any parking in the street. So all the on-street parking that we see now, angled and parallel, is going to disappear as a result of this plan. That's our understanding as a board. So, is there any further discussion about the site plan before we move on to a motion and vote? Okay, I'll accept a motion then to approve the site plan review application for Lower Atkinson Common.
I'll move to approve the site plan review application for Lower Atkinson Commons.
Is there a second? Okay, I moved and seconded.
Sorry, who was the second? Was it Jen? Okay, thank you.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. You're done with us.
Thank you.
That looks good.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Request for minor modification at 166 Route 1.
Sorry, with the chair, I'll present this briefly. I had discussed with Midco whether or not they actually need to be here this evening. I didn't feel that was necessary. I think I can summarize pretty briefly. So this is in the 40R Smart Growth District. This is the most recent project that you had approved. It's on Route 1. I have the relevant plans available here. So this project, it happens to be at the so-called Haley site on Route 1. Assumption that will obviously be permanently replaced with new housing and a mixed-use site on the first floor of that building. This is the illustrative plan that goes with that. And in essence, what has been requested here is the planning board and the applicant had agreed to a series of improvements, typical, just like the last application you looked at. We try to make sidewalk connections as best as possible, like, path connections, things like that. And what happened here was we had two things. One was a deceleration lane, but the other piece was a sidewalk along the frontage. And in talking with Mass DOT about those improvements, Mass DOT, not necessarily unsurprisingly, wanted to make sure that the fee and interest for that new public access, essentially quasi, essentially public access at that point, that's being made, that they wanted that fee interest that be transferred to Mass DOT, so it would then be part of the state right of way with that sidewalk access. I think they wanted to basically make sure that that was locked in on their end as well for that public access. So in essence, what that did was, because that was actually part of the lot area, Mako is not expressing the opposition to this to Mass DOT, but rather has returned to the planning board just asking if a minor adjustment can be made to the calculation of the lot area for this particular project. That is something that the board can do. This actually is still within the 40 units per acre that's allowed under the ordinance. I think it goes from 38 to 39 units per acre. In essence, with a slight reduction of about 5,000 square feet. But in essence, it is only it creates the exact same plan you had previously approved, but mechanically accomplishes that by satisfying Mass DOT's request for this frontage, this strip here, to be transferred to them, and that is shown. It's a little bit harder to see in this drawing here because it's so long, but in essence, what you're seeing here in the background is the building here is in this area. It's a little hard to make out, but the building is in this area. And this strip right here, essentially on the frontage, is where that sidewalk goes. And they're asking for that right-of-way line to be adjusted to accommodate those improvements. This little notation right here actually is just about some grass paved support. Basically, it's plastic grids essentially that they install in that grass section because it's providing access, emergency access for emergency personnel per the plan the planning board approved at this location near the building. So in essence, the grass here would be have extra support underneath it essentially. But that's all this plan is for. It doesn't change ultimately the plan that the improvements the planning board wanted, and therefore the office doesn't object to the change and recommends approval of the modification as being consistent with that. If it hadn't resulted in physical changes to the plan, we'd be more concerned. If it was later to be given to some other party as opposed to the state for that same public access, we might have concerns. But in this instance, it seems to make sense and be entirely consistent with what the planning board had wanted to accomplish through the improvements the applicant was proposing at that time. So if you're accommodating it, we'll recommend approval of minor modification.
I had a question on the left-hand side of the yellow stripe.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So, is that what we actually approved, the sidewalk kind of ending and then taking a right angle turn into the parking area?
Let me take a look at the
Oh, sorry, I just didn't notice it until tonight.
That's great. So this is our.
Oh, yes, there it is, right there. Yep, it is, okay. It's interesting.
And I forget the exact discussion. I remember the deceleration lane discussion. I don't recall that particular discussion with the sidewalk piece there, but I imagine it might have had a little bit to do with, crossing right there, Avenue One, and maybe wanting to get folks right to return. As far as the cons, of course, anything in that location, but.
I just remember the discussion of saying that MassDOT ultimately wanted to have a sidewalk going the whole length of it on that side. And so I guess this leaves for some future development at the next parcel up to continue that sidewalk across the driveway entrance.
Yeah, I would certainly expect, as you know, with any other phasing, what we'd be advocating for any future connections, section by section if necessary.
And what is that on this plan that we're looking, go back to the other plan? Is that those drainage chambers, that are shown, the rectangles where it says meet site by others?
Oh, yes, this is underground.
That's a drainage plan.
Yeah, that's the underground infiltration tanks. They're not labeled, but that's what that is.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about this? So then the motion would be to,
I'll move to consider the
Consider-
request minor and to approve the minor modification.
okay, is there a second? Okay. Any discussion? Not all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, great, that passes. Okay. We are on to approval of minutes. I submitted some comments, and edits on both the November 15th and the December 6th minutes. I don't know, maybe, and probably submitted some to you. Bob probably did. If anybody has any additional comments or changes to make. And is there anybody who needs to not vote because they weren't here during those meetings? Who's here? Great. Okay, so I would accept a motion to approve both the November 15th and the December 6th minutes.
I'll move to approve both sets of minutes.
Is there a second? Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, great. Anything to talk about zoning tonight?
I don't think, not more for the rest of the membership, and Rick and I have been talking a lot, obviously a lot more detail, but, about some of the zoning changes we're bringing forward, but, we'll be circling back with you for some materials. I would definitely say, I think as I mentioned before, definitely take a look at the 40R historic growth district, and think about things that you like or don't like, or have questions about in that zoning district. All the text is online on our Muni Code, page that we refer to. And there's the map of the district, of course, there. If there's any questions you have, let me know, but think about that district and think about application of something very akin to that to the Story Avenue area. That's one thing, right? So, getting your feedback about those things, if you want to reach out individually or you want to circle back to the discussion here, we're looking for your feedback about those things. The consultant will be helping us to, as part of an effort we're already, mobilized in, to re-envision that area, work with a permitting, process or something akin to the 40R district we were familiar with, and that, seems to work well, as we've seen here with some of these, the projects we've seen from Minko and the 40R thus far. But it would help us to change the Story Avenue area, so think about the permitting process, anything you think might need to be adjusted in there. So we can think about that. Obviously, think about the form of development up by Story Avenue as we start to get into the particulars of where height is allowed, what kind of massing, what kind of setbacks, things like that. I would think a lot of the same sort of urban design principles would generally apply, but think about where you think some of those things are appropriate or not, appropriate. You think about elevation changes are a little bit different between Low Street and Story Ave. Whereas in the 40R district, we, for instance, have a greater height allowance near the train station or right abutting the train station, whereas if you go further out, close to residential neighborhoods that are further up State Street, papers down, 3 stories. So think about things like that. And that way, as we're getting feedback from you about both the map for the district and the text of the ordinance, that we're thinking of bringing forward, that we'll have all your input on those pieces. And then the same thing for the MBTA community side of things too. That's more about, I think, building up our 40R smart growth district, but some of that we can satisfy some of those changes with the Story Avenue rezoning. So there's a good timing to be doing these together. And then, the business park, there isn't any, consultant assistance available for that effort there, but we'll be obviously, especially since we're looking at, we take community right on the train station, looking at the business park, thinking about the intersection and some of the, adjustments that would make sense, I think, at this point, if you look at our business park, where things have trended, where they've tracked, there are some areas, for instance, up by the Low Street area that don't make sense to have industrial, you wouldn't necessarily want to encourage industrial uses fronting on Hale and Low Street there. They're sort of residential in nature, so, the adjustments like that, we'll be talking about map changes as well as use allowance changes. Similar when you think about Graff Road and Parker Street, that section there where we talked about, more diversity of uses. We had a little bit more diversity of uses on that section of that L portion, particularly the Graff Road section of, the business park. Much more so than the western portion of the business park, which is largely, been maintained as industrial slash, corporate office type, office businesses, but the less of the quote unquote traffic that might come with the other uses.
I guess the only other thing I would say is, if there are places that you are aware of that you particularly like, that have been conversion of like a strip development to something more mixed use or something, or that you could see as a model for what might happen on Story Avenue, that we could bring that up and go and look at those zoning regulations that happened there, see how that was enabled to happen.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and that's a great point. Those examples, as well as if you have even just visuals of those, examples you want to send our way, we're happy to, drag and search there a little further with you. But those are great for multiple reasons, thinking about the permitting processes that were used, the requirements for design, obviously being very important here in the report. And having some examples as we talk with folks to illustrate what that area might look like. We're gonna have some renderings to go with that as we bring forward a package to the council, to illustrate what that transition will look like, down the road as this area is incrementally redeveloped from strip malls into a little village node that looks like you're arriving in Newburyport. That transition will take time with each property, but visualizing that is helpful. And so as we've talked about other examples, we say we'll name individuals, but we think about individual projects or development somewhere else. Some of them are Newburyport, but some of them other places, wherever the use is, wherever the location is, send them our way. We're happy to sort of think about that as something that might be useful for illustrating, looking at the background, the regulations involved, and rolling into the picture here to try to get the best possible outcome, whether it's the map of the district or the actual requirements and allowances within it. Thank you.
Okay, we're on to the big event of the night, election of officers. Bob has indicated that he would like to not continue as vice chair. I'm happy to continue, but I'm happy to cede it to someone else if they would like to do it as well. So we need to have nominations for chair, vice chair, and secretary. Alden is,
I'm fine with
you're
continuing.
finding?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll nominate Rick for chair.
Anybody else? Anybody want to second that?
I'll second that. I'll second that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start there. All those in favor of Rick Taylor as chair for the next year? Any opposed? Thank goodness. Okay, need to have somebody step up for vice chair. And as I mentioned in my email, it's not a really heavy lift. I think it's more interesting than work. It's basically meeting with the planning staff about 9 days before each meeting and going over what's come in so far, raising questions, asking the staff to follow up on things, that sort of thing. So,
And in the occasion,
Yes.
the chair is.
and if the chair is not here, sitting in to chair the meeting. That
Which
hasn't-
of course, we're here to help with, yeah, so.
and that hasn't happened, I think. at all, has it?
Yeah, no, we haven't seen that yet.
I would echo all of that too. It's been very beneficial to participate in those meetings. My only point is, I think others should have that opportunity. Because there is another layer of information, there's another opportunity for input, so I just wanted to open that up for others to have that opportunity.
Anyone raise their hand? Nobody's raised. Know what we do?
We could, I mean, if.
I'll vote for Charlie. I'll let him know, I'd be happy
We're
to.
not here this evening. We could certainly, you know, if we wanted to solidify the chair tonight, we could carry the others, you know, any other positions for another night if you want, if that's necessary. You know, obviously, like the chair said, it would be nice to know and be able to move ahead one or the other, but we could, discuss that at the next agenda if necessary.
If nobody here wants to do it, they can talk to Chair. Okay,
Or the other members that are,
was that,
or the other members that are.
So we'll,
well, Heather definitely
Heather,
told me
I'll
she does not want to do it.
Yeah.
That's it, well, yeah.
Yeah, we could ask that
so
too.
we can note for the other members that weren't here tonight, we'll circle back at the next meeting on that, that's it.
Okay, so, could I have a nomination for Alden to be continuous secretary for the next year?
You sure you don't want to go for vice chair?
That's it. Yeah.
I'll nominate all.
And I will second.
Okay. Is there any opposition? All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, we'll try to twist some arms between now and, oh, so we're not meeting in early January.
Correct, the first meeting that would typically be that day after, you know, 2 days after New Year, we will have that meeting, so we'll go to the next one. Obviously, you'll get our usual update from us, you know, in advance of that second meeting that we typically have in the month.
So,
And also, plan on looking probably for some things coming from me related to the zoning, and this stuff. You know, as we ramp up with that, look for some materials to review in advance of some discussions.
okay. So everybody have a great holiday season. And, I could have, or is there anybody else who wants to bring anything else up before I close the meeting? Okay, so, motion, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
That's all second.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning? Thank you. Have a great, great end of the year. See you in January.
Actually, one question just came up to me. Where does the city council stand with the STRE? Where is that?
So it's been adopted, the new
Yeah.
ordinances have been adopted, they just, we had to continue with some discussions related to fees or, you know, impact fees related to those, which, you know, has moved forward as well, so. We're in the implementation phase, sorry, do you bring, I have to check with you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we are now in the process of implementing, the selection of the online vendor. We've talked about different vendors that help to monitor, the online, rental registration processes that are going on to make sure we have compliance with the ordinance. So we're ramping up to, interview and select the vendor we're gonna work with on that front, separate from our online permitting platform. We're gonna keep it on the same OpenGov platform, so all the permitting in the city is on the same platform. But that platform doesn't do monitoring of short-term rent unit on the other, you know, Airbnb and stuff like that. So, so they'll help us out with that process, and that'll help with the enforcement side of things, you know, should issues arise. But other than that, we're ramping up to send information out to those who are out there operating, particularly those obviously who are registered with the state, to let them know about, you know, happen to come in for a license in the city, happen to be eligible for the special permit if they're in that so-called investor category, that limited, you know, duration where it's being advertised as a sub-use. So we're getting information out to folks, drafting information we're reviewing right now or online that'll explain to folks what the requirements are, what to expect, you know, what they need to be mindful of, and we're reviewing the draft of that essentially to mimic some good examples we've seen elsewhere. And so again, we'll have that stuff online. If you want to take a look with us or see any more of that, we can push that your way. But basically, we're consistent with the ordinance, preparing the materials for the online permitting to get that cycled in, you know, for the next year. The enforcement side, depending on if there's any issues, we'll use that tool to enforce against those who are operating without a license or operating with a license, but causing nuisances and perhaps need to have their licenses reviewed.
Thank you. I just wondered, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Good night.